But tonight we are looking into the Eighth Commandment. And can someone tell me what the Eighth Commandment is before I turn the slide? Bethel. You shall not steal. You shall not steal. So, in the second table so far, we've looked at how to honor those in authority over us and also how to honor those in authority beneath us with the Fifth Commandment. We looked at how to honor our neighbor's life, how to honor our neighbor's wife, and now we are to look how to honor his property. Okay? That's what this commandment is about. You shall not steal. Now, a lot of Christians have the mindset, maybe not the majority of Christians, probably not, but there are many that have this misconception that we shouldn't care all that much about our personal property in this world. In fact, some go even far as to say that private property is not a Christian concept, right? And that the early church was a borderline communist-style community where no one owned anything and everyone received what they needed, right? It was this perfect little hippie communist utopia. And yes, Acts 2, verses 44 and 45 says that the believers had all things in common and that they were selling their possessions to give to those in need. It does say that. However, that was all voluntary. Communism's not voluntary, like by definition. That's why it makes me upset whenever people try to say the church was communist. No, it wasn't. You don't understand what communism is. You've not read any documents about communism from its actual founders. Communism is a statist worldview that requires force of the state to make it happen. This was all voluntary, totally voluntary, right? And we see this in chapter 5 with Ananias and Sapphira, right? What happened to Ananias and Sapphira? No, they didn't steal, at least not directly. So they sold a piece of property that they had, and they got the money from it. And then what did they do with that money? They kept part of it.
Well, they said they were going to give all of it. They gave all of it, quote unquote, and they hid it in the ground. And Ananias just died. So he just killed over because he was lying.
Right.
His wife came in and saw him dead and killed over as well. And then he was like, well, this is why you should tithe the money that you said you were going to give all of.
Well, yeah, so that's mostly correct. So they sold the land. They, like you said they gave all the money to the church, when in reality they kept a portion for themselves. And Peter calls out Ananias on this, and he says, look, while it remained unsold, did it not remain your own? And after it was sold, was it not at your disposal? What he's saying there is, you could have done whatever you wanted to do with this land. It's yours. You did not have to do that. You did not have to sell it and then lie about giving us all the money. Okay? But they couldn't, so they were permitted to sell the land and just keep all the money for themselves. That was totally fine. They were totally permitted to do that. What they couldn't do was lie to the apostles about how much money they were giving. And Peter even says, you are lying not to man but to God by doing this. And so that's why they die. They die because they're lying to the church. But what this shows is that the early church was not a communist or socialist type of little social experiment here, right? You were allowed to own property. You were allowed to sell that property and do whatever you wanted with it. But you had to be honest in how you dealt with that that money, which is far from being communist. That's just basic morality. And aside from this example, bit of a tangent, but we know that private property is a Christian principle because we are commanded not to steal. If no one owns anything, then how can anything be stolen? If no one owns anything, if I don't own this laptop and one of you takes it, you did not steal it because I don't own it. No one owns it. It's just anything. It's just anyone that grabs it, right?
I'm gonna borrow this for a couple days.
Yeah, it's similar to the seventh commandment, whereas if marriage didn't exist, the command to not commit adultery doesn't mean anything because there's no marriage. Right? There's nothing that's being violated by the act of adultery. Same thing here. If the concept of private property does not exist, then theft not only is fine, but it doesn't even exist at all because nothing can actually be stolen. Right? Taking a car from someone's driveway would be no different than picking up a stick in the woods. Right? Picking up a stick in the woods, taking it home, that's not theft. Right? No one cares if you do that. Yes?
Unless you're on a
You can't take a stick home from a national park. Okay, we're all going to go to a national park. I expect all of you to take a stick and bring it home.
Okay.
We're going to see how many sticks we can smuggle back here.
That one church we went to?
What?
The red t-shirts we got, that one.
Oh yeah, that huge?
Yeah, we did. Didn't we take some?
We didn't steal anything. What?
Erickson? He took something home.
Oh, I don't remember what he took home. He didn't steal anything as far as I'm aware.
By accident, whenever we were doing
The t-shirt cannon? Oh.
The activities, we had the same activities like the people thing.
Oh, okay. I don't remember anyone stealing anything on that trip, so I'm not responsible for that. Anyway, so yeah, theft is impossible if private property doesn't exist. So the fact that we're given this commandment tells us that private property is perfectly compatible with the Christian worldview, okay? But while we're thinking about that, what does it actually mean to own something? Right? We talk about ownership, property, private property. What does that mean? What does it mean to own something? Yes?
I feel like if you purchase it or it's gifted to you by someone, then you own it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes, Zeke?
You worked
Okay. So you're describing how we come to own something, but I'm asking, what does it actually mean to own something, Aubrey?
Like to have dominion over it. Like, say, I crocheted a strawberry cow. Like I made it and I say it's mine.
Mm-hmm.
It is mine. I have dominion over it.
Right.
I can say where it goes, what it is, and I can give it to someone and say, it is mine, and I give it to you.
Right. Yes, Josh?
To have responsibility.
That responsibility, right? Dominion and responsibility go hand in hand. Yeah, very true. So first, before we get into any of that, which that was all correct, but before we get into any of that, we got to remember that ultimately we actually don't own anything, because ultimately God owns everything. Okay? God owns everything. There's the citation there from Psalm 50 says, God owns, he's saying, do I not own the cattle on 1,000 hills, right? Do I not own all of these things? He's saying all of creation belongs to me. And he's talking about that because in the Psalm, he's saying to Israel, like, look, you're never going to be able to sacrifice enough bulls to, make me happy with you while you're living in sin. I own all the bulls. I own all the animals, right? I already have them. You're not giving them to me. You're not giving me anything new. So God owns everything, which means that all of our ownership is limited and temporary. And this goes for both believers and unbelievers, right? God owns the property of the faithful, selfless Christian and the property of the greedy, rich unbeliever. All of it's his. One acknowledges that, one doesn't, but it doesn't matter because God owns all of it, right? And God can and will do whatever he wants and with whatever he wants, whenever he wants, regardless of whatever plans we had for our property. The only difference is when God decides to take property from you that you had plans for but was taken anyway, are you going to submit to that or are you going to grumble and complain? So you got to remember that God owns everything. Everything you have, even your own physical body that you were born with, even that is something God owns and God is letting you use for now. And God will give it back to you in the resurrection in a glorified state. But God still owns it. God still has total, absolute dominion over it. Okay? So in light of this, we should understand that we are stewards of whatever we possess. Now, what is a steward? Not the name steward. Steward. Yes, Carrie? A caretaker? That's a good way of describing it. Anyone else? Esley? Watches over something? Right. Okay. Where do we see the word steward or the concept of a steward pop up in Scripture? Oh my God.
You are so late.
Very late, Liam.
I'm back to work because I forgot to turn.
No problem. All right.
That's funny of yours.
Anyway, someone had their hand raised. Zeke, you had your hand raised. I think I asked, where is the concept or word of steward used in Scripture? Like, where do we see it used?
Isn't it like Genesis?
Yeah, we do see it described in Genesis, right? Where in Genesis, though? Genesis is a big book. Where is it described? Yes?
I'm guessing. Isn't it in God and it says for Adam
Right, because God owns the Garden of Eden. God made it, God grew it, but he lets Adam have dominion over it. But it's naturally a limited dominion, right? Adam can't take the Garden of Eden in a direction God doesn't want it to go. He tries to do that when he eats of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and God kicks him out for it. Okay? But yeah, Adam is a steward of what God gave to him. Yeah, a steward is someone who's granted responsibility and authority over someone else's property. Okay? Now that authority is obviously under the person that actually owns it, but it's still a level of authority. Think of like a manager at, whatever place you work. They are not the owner, at least in most places they aren't the owner, but they have authority over what goes on there. They can tell employees what to do. They can kick bad customers out if they need to, right? They can make calls as to what needs to be changed. They just can't usurp the owner's authority. So whatever we lawfully possess, meaning we rightfully come into, right? We don't steal it. We don't come into it by other sinful means. Whatever we lawfully possess, God has given us authority over. Okay? We can use it, take care of it, sell it, leave it alone, whatever, depending on what it is, of course. As long as we don't use it to sin in any way, right? That's the one thing but it's basically the one thing we can't do, right? Whatever we have, we can't use it for sin, yes?
Is there even a way to use stocks to sin?
Like stock markets?
Yes.
Yeah, you could partake in like shady business dealings, like insider trading and things like that. There's that economics is something I very much struggle to understand a lot of the time, but there are definitely ways you can sin doing that. Even if it's all, actually we'll get into that, even if it's all legal, it may be deceptive and lying. So yeah, there's definitely a way to do that. And so yeah, we see this where God plants the Garden of Eden and he gives Adam authority over it, right? And that model of God has ultimate authority, but humanity has an authority over the world, that was meant to extend to the entire creation, right? And God's purpose in doing this was that his glory would be displayed throughout mankind's glory, right? When the Bible says that man is the glory of God, it's not saying that mankind is more glorious than God. It's saying God is glorified by showing his greatest creation, which is man. And then his greatest glory is in redeeming that creation through Christ. So that's what it means to own something. It's not an ultimate ownership. It's a stewardship. But it is still a real earthly authority over these things. Okay, we can't just say, well, God owns everything, so I can take whatever I want, or I don't have to be in charge of everything. No, you are given charge over things, and you have authority over them, and you have responsibility over them. But now, how do we come to own things? Bless you, by the way, Caleb. How do we come to own things? There's several ways we can come to own things. Yeah?
Make it.
You make it? You invent it? What?
Buy it.
Buy it?
Trade it.
That's essentially buying it. Money is just a currency used for trade, but yeah. You said burn it?
What?
Oh, earn it. Yes, you can do that, Josh.
Steal it. I mean, technically, yes.
Wait,
Technically,
like
yes.
to own something?
Okay, how do we come to lawfully own things?
Oh,
Zeke?
Um,
So he said purchase, invent.
receive.
Yeah, it can be gifted to you, Kerrigan. Inheritance, right? You say bribe?
That's not lawful.
That violates the next commandment.
We're not bribing you guys. No, can we use Latin?
Just
Do you have it?
yeah, conceive. Can women like conceive it? We make children and then we own that child.
So yes, that would fall under another category I'm going to call providence.
Wait.
But yes, that would fall under that. That is true. That would fall under invention, but I agree with you. Yeah, I'm using broad categories here. So if you think of any outside of these, let me know. But you come to own things through purchase, so buying it from someone else who's either made it or bought it from someone else. Oh, sorry, did you have one?
Borrow it.
So then you don't own
You
it.
don't
Borrow
own
it,
it,
like,
bro.
they give it to you.
Right.
You don't have to like rent it.
Yeah, okay, that's almost like a stewardship of another steward, but yeah, that is true. So you have purchase, right, where you buy it from someone. Inheritance, your parents had it and they passed it on to you in their will, or some other family relative passed it on to you. Gifting, so where you didn't work to earn it, someone just gave it to you like a Christmas present. invention, which would include intellectual property like writing a story or writing a song, right? Stuff that isn't physical, but you own it nonetheless. And then providence. Providence basically just means, think of like I said, walking through the woods, and it's not someone's property. It's just random woods. You pick up a pine cone and you take it home. You own that pine cone now, even though like you didn't have to buy it or work for it or no one's gifted to you. It's providence. You found it on the ground, right? Or you could think back to when people were spreading out throughout the earth after the Tower of Babel, right? The first group didn't have to buy their land from anyone, right? When their descendants of whoever were going up through Europe, they didn't have to buy the land they were living on from anyone. They just said, okay, this is our land. This is where we're going to live, right? Now, obviously, we don't have anything like that now, but it was just providence. Here's their land. This is where they are. This is what they're going to take. Yep.
I thought a new way to own something, waging war on a person or group. How do you own
So
that?
it's funny you bring that up, because in Deuteronomy 20, when God's giving the laws of warfare, he does allow, and this is not the warfare with the Canaanites, because they were supposed to kill everything there. He does allow them to take war spoils. He says you can take the women and the children and the riches of the city that you're. So that would be one case in which what we would see as theft is allowed because you defeated them in war. But there'd probably be a lot of asterisks I want to put on that. But it is technically allowable. All right, so yeah, those are the ways you can come into owning something.
What about squatters' rights?
How about squatters' wrongs?
Yeah, right.
I feel like someone else had a question. I just didn't answer it.
Oh.
Anyway, so yeah, these are the ways we come into ownership. All right, so basically to own something means to have an earthly authority over whatever God has allowed you to possess, and using whatever you possess for the good and glory of God. Okay, so whatever we own, we are held accountable for. Right? So now that we know what ownership means, let's have a look at theft in some detail. And there's three main kinds of theft that I've kind of found throughout Scripture. One is theft by force. And this, I'm using force a little broadly here. I'm not just talking about like beating someone up and mugging them, though that is included here. By this, I'm talking about just taking what belongs to someone else, just straight up taking it. Okay? There we go. So anyone want to read these verses? Aubrey.
They say, come with us, let us die and wait for blood.
Lie.
Huh?
Lie.
Lie?
Not die.
Oh.
Just
Wait for blood. We shall find all precious goods. We shall fill our houses with plunder.
okay. Thank you. So this is in Proverbs. This is where Solomon's warning his son about what kind of people to avoid. And he says, essentially avoid gangs, avoid people who want to do violence and take stuff from people. So this is kind of open theft, which breaks into houses or jumps people in the street or robs at gunpoint. This is often paired with violence, right? And Solomon is warning about that. Because some people are skilled enough to not have to steal using violence, right? Some people are very tricky about that. But a lot of people are not. So they have to use violence. They have to go into your house with a gun or with some type of weapon and take it from you by force. Okay? And this shows the mixings of sins that Scripture talks about, right? Sin hardly ever stays in its own little neat category. Okay? It's not like just theft without any lying or any murder or anything like that, right? Sin mixes. Sin is like a web, and it connects all the other sins until you've broken all the commandments in some way. All right? So this kind of theft is just sheer greed. Just plain and simple. It's sheer greed. You want something that's not yours, but you're going to take it anyway. You're not going to go through any lawful means. You're not going to try to buy it from them. You're not going to try to persuade them to give it to you. I don't know how you do that, but you could do it some way. You're just going to take it. Okay? And even if you have to hurt someone else to do it, you'll do it anyway. This also includes destruction of property, right? If you just vandalize something or take something and then destroy it in some way, right? That is theft, right? Because even when it's done, because you're still removing the owner's ability to use whatever that was, right? You burn down someone's house, that is theft. Okay, even though you can't you didn't steal the house because it'd be kind of hard to do that unless it's a mobile home, right? But you still took it from that person, right? That person is now without this piece of property. And even when it's done unintentionally, it's still considered theft. This is the principle behind you break it, you buy it, right? It's like, okay, yeah, we appreciate that you didn't intend to destroy this property, but you did, and now you are responsible for it, right? It's similar to in the Sixth Commandment, you shall not murder. Manslaughter is technically included in that. Now, it's obviously not the same level as intentional murder, but someone has still died, and you are still the one that did it. Okay, so it's the same thing here. The verse I referenced here talks about if a fire breaks out and goes into someone else's field and destroys it, the person who started the fire is held responsible, right? And they probably didn't mean to do it, but they did it anyway, so they're held responsible for it. And this also includes the worst kind of stealing, which is man-stealing or kidnapping. Okay? In modern day, we might call this human trafficking, right? This is a kind of theft. You are stealing this person's ability to live a normal life, right? To have liberty and freedom. You're stealing that from them, okay? And while Scripture controversially does not forbid slavery outright, it does not forbid slavery in principle, it does absolutely forbid the stealing of people for the purpose of enslaving them, right? This verse I reference here, Exodus 21:6 says, if anyone is caught stealing a man, both the thief and the one who buys him shall be put to death, right? The death penalty was reserved for this kind of theft. Not for other kinds of theft. You don't go chopping people's hands off like they do in the Middle East, or some parts of the Middle East, for theft, right? It's a bit too far. But for man stealing, death, right? And if you've ever done any research into human trafficking, you probably have no problem with that type of penalty. So that's theft by force. That's kind of the most obvious thing we think of. We think of stealing. Think of someone pickpocketing you, hitting you in the face and taking your wallet, breaking into your house. That's the kind of theft I'm talking about, and that's the most obvious. But there's sneakier ones that we need to be aware of. We have theft by deception. Okay? Theft by deception. And this is, as it says, deceiving someone into giving up what is theirs. Okay? And while this may not technically break any laws, they are stealing nonetheless because they've lied to their victim. At least in most cases, they've lied. Yes?
It's like, hey, can I borrow a pencil? Yeah, sure, just give it back when you're in class. Hey, you have my pencil? What pencil?
That's almost just gaslighting at that point. You never gave me, this has been my pencil the whole time. Gaslighting would be in the Ninth Commandment more than this, but it could be used for this. So theft is probably the sin that is seen throughout the other sins more than anything else. Right? There's theft associated with murder and with lying and with coveting, obviously, and with many other things. Like theft kind of gets its hands in everywhere, just like an actual thief does. So God calls out thieves like this throughout the whole book of Proverbs, but really here in Proverbs 20, verse 10. Does anyone want to read this verse? Esley? Go ahead and read both of them.
Unequal weights and unequal measures are both alike an abomination to the Lord. But whoever oppresses the poor to increase his own wealth, or gives to the rich will only comes with poverty.
Okay, so in the first one, he says unequal weights and unequal measures. Okay, does anyone know what he's referring to here? Zeke. It has to do with payments. Liam?
It's in reference to, let's say you have a 5-pound weight when it's actually 3.5 pounds.
You mark it as a 5-pound weight. Okay, yes, that is what he's saying. It's a deceptive kind of weight. So it's a reference to how money was exchanged at the time. So money was exchanged either by stone, which is the weight here. These are the King James terms, but it's the Hebrew terms for it. But unequal stones and unequal ephahs. So a stone was weight, and then an ephah was a measure of grain. Okay, so just different ways of measuring currency here. Now, of course, this only works if you have the same kind of weight and measure for everything. right? Standardized across the board. Otherwise, you can't have people using different weights at each different place you go to, because then it becomes very confusing. It'd be like if you had one store that took dollars, one store that took pesos, one store that took euros, one store that, like, it would be very frustrating, right? That's why we have standardized currency. That's why when you go to a foreign country, you trade in your American currency for whatever currency they have there, right? So that way you can buy and sell and trade. So this only works if you have a standardized system. But what dishonest businessmen at the time would do is they would use a heavier weight when they were paying something. They would use a heavier weight when they were paying, but a lighter weight when they were receiving payment. Okay, so they would use an honest weight, how do I put this? They would use a weight that said more but was actually less when they were paying something, so they could get away with paying less. And when they were receiving payment, they would have a weight that said, 3 pounds, like you said, 3 pounds, but it's actually 5 pounds. And so they just keep putting their money down, saying, "Oh, it hasn't reached the 5 pounds yet. It hasn't reached the 3 pounds yet. It hasn't reached 3 pounds yet. You got to keep putting money in." When in reality, if it was actually 3 pounds, they would have already reached that by that point. Okay, so it's money manipulation here. And this is likely also has to do with what Jesus did when he overturned the money changers in the temple. Yes, one part was that they were in the temple doing this, and that was bad, but also they were ripping people off, right? Because you got to think, at Passover, people are coming in from all over the Roman Empire, right? They're not just in Jerusalem. So they're coming in with other currencies, and they're probably saying, "Oh, your Greek money or your Roman money, that's no good here. Here, you got to exchange it for this money." And they would cheat them in the exchange. And these are poor people traveling very long distance. Probably took them several weeks or months to get there, right? They don't know any better. But they're taking advantage of people that are in a desperate situation, which actually leads into the next part here. But this is essentially known as fraud. And fraud is very illegal today. It's not only theft, but it's lying as well, which is a violation of the Ninth Commandment. And Jesus mentions this to the rich young ruler in Mark 10:19, when he's going through all the commandments. Right? He says, "Don't commit adultery, don't murder." He says, "Don't steal." And then he also says, "Don't defraud." It's interesting that he brings that up, because it might be him implying that this rich young ruler got rich by doing some fraud, right? Because fraud on its own isn't one of the 10 commandments. It's under stealing. So, but God makes clear how horrible this sin is to him by calling it an abomination. Okay? Why do you think God despises fraud so much that he calls it an abomination?
It's
Yeah.
giving,
Go ahead, Bill.
okay, it's giving a person out of their hard-earned money or things that they got.
That's part of it, yes.
And deceive.
That's true. Satan did deceive Eve in the garden. Going a little deeper here, though. One of the glues of human community and society is business. It's commerce. It's trade. That's why society, it's one of the reasons why society is formed. Okay? So if you cannot trust people, even in something as mutually beneficial as a business dealing, where I am getting something I want and you are getting something you want, if you can't even trust people in that, it leads to societal collapse and deterioration, right? Societies are built on trust. You have to be able to trust people. You trust your police officers. You trust the people that are working on your car, that they're going to be honest, right? You have to trust all these people, right? No one can do everything on their own. That's why we form societies and specialize in different things. But if that trust breaks down, it's going to make life more difficult for everyone, right? If people begin to doubt the honesty of their mechanic or their doctor or their lawyer, right? Especially these bigger, expensive things, it's gonna be very difficult for people to live. And in a society where businesses are dishonest with their prices, who do you think suffers the most in that society?
The people who don't make much, the people who don't have to do it.
Yeah, poor people, right? The poor. The poor are often tricked into paying more for the things they need, right? Fraud is a form of oppression. Right? And that's why I had this other verse down here, right? Whoever oppresses the poor to increase his own wealth or gives to the rich will only come to poverty. Now, why do greedy people like to target the poor? Why do you think they do that?
Does the poor need to know that much? Or anything like that?
Yeah, they're ignorant in one sense. That's true. What else? Yes?
Public money the poor because they're already poor. Yes, they know that. They want to stay on top so they can have this social hierarchy. Because there's always going to have to be poor people, so if they keep them as poor, then they'll still be upper class.
That's definitely part of it, right? There will always be, I mean, Jesus said you will always have the poor with you. Yes,
I guess poor people could be deceived easier and like they're more desperate. So,
yeah, they're desperate. That's the main thing, right? Poor people are more likely to be desperate because they don't have as many options. Okay, they're easy to exploit in this regard. Even if the poor person knows better, they're like, well, I don't have any other option. I've got to go to this guy who I know overcharges me to fix my car, but there's no other mechanic in town or whatever, right? However, this is only good in the short term because poor people will eventually not be able to pay if you keep overcharging them because they don't have much money, right? So that's one reason this is a bad look. Alternatively, a competitor could realize that you are overcharging your customers and then just swoop in and steal all your customers by saying, hey, I actually charge a much lower price. Now everyone goes to them. And then you can adjust with the prices, of course, but your shtick is up essentially, right? Everyone's going to see, oh, you've been overcharging us for years and years. We don't like you anymore, okay? Either way, you now end up going under because you treated your customers shamefully, right? And this is why this verse says those who oppress the poor are going to end up poor themselves, right? They wanted riches and they wanted it fast and they wanted to stay in their position, but in doing so, they end up squeezing the lemon too dry. And now it's gone. They have nothing left. So charging people reasonable prices is a difficult thing to determine. There is no exact formula for any of that because you got to take into account quality. You got to take into account what your competitors are doing. Like there's so much that goes into it. It's difficult to determine as a business owner, especially in bad economies with inflation. But as Christians, we should remember that the first purpose of our work is to bless people. And the second is to make money for ourselves. Right? Making money for yourself is essential because you need to be able to stay alive and, support your family. But the first purpose is to bless people. Right? You should have some type of talent or ability or interest that is going to be beneficial in some way. Right? And and you can use that to make money with it. So that's theft by deception. Then there's theft by omission. Okay? Theft by omission. This means refusing to give someone what they are owed. Okay. Does anyone want to read Leviticus 19:13? All right, Aubrey, go ahead.
You shall not oppress your neighbor to rob him or rob him. The wages of a hired worker shall not remain with you all night until the morning.
Okay. So this verse gives us a direct application to the business world, right? An employer, many of you have jobs, your employers are in a contract with you, right? You sign some paperwork. Maybe your parents had to sign it too. I don't know if they have to do that since you guys are minors, but they sign some agreement with you saying that you will work in this position, doing this job for this amount of hours, and they will pay you X amount of dollars per hour, right? That is your agreement with them, okay? So if you work, you are owed payment when in the time that he's promised to give it to you, right? And so at this time especially, the time the Bible was written, wages were paid daily, especially for day workers, like laborers, right? Like construction workers, farmhands. They were paid daily. I believe it's called a denarii. That was a day's wage. Yeah. So you finish your work, here's your denarii. Now you can take that and go buy your food and stuff, whatever you need for the day, okay? And so keeping one's wages overnight for no good reason would violate that agreement. Because it's not just, hey, you said you would pay me. It's, hey, you said you would pay me at this time. And I need it at this time because I have bills that are due or I have things I need to go buy at this time, right? These workers lived what we would call paycheck to paycheck, right? So that means they need the paychecks to come in on time. They relied on each day's wages to put food on the table. And when it wasn't there, okay, now you've taken food off the table for a day. And I need that money back, right? But it isn't just limited to monetary agreements, yes?
Is it illegal to not pay your workers by the time you're supposed to pay them?
I mean, it's certainly illegal if you're doing it intentionally. It's one thing to be like, something happens at the office and it's like, oh, our secretary's sick. Like at this church before, like our bookkeeper's been sick, so she can't sign the check, so I have to come in later and get my check, right? That's totally fine. But intentionally being like, no, we will not pay you without you doing some offense that, would warrant that. That would be illegal, because most work contracts have something that's, unless you're paid salary, which even then, that's still on a basis. They say, we will pay you at these times of the month. But so it isn't just limited to money though, right? This includes relationships between superiors and inferiors, like we talked about in the Fifth Commandment, right? A superior is owed honor, right? That's owed to them. They're owed honor, they're owed obedience by their inferiors, yeah?
Do you get paid weekly?
No, I get paid bi-monthly,
Oh,
like most people. I assume most of you who have jobs probably get paid bi-monthly too.
monthly?
Bi-monthly, 2 times a month.
You don't know what that means?
You mean bi-weekly?
What?
Bi-weekly.
Oh, yeah, it would,
It's
yeah, bi-weekly would be twice a
Wait
week.
a minute.
What?
It's right both ways.
Bi-weekly would mean bi-monthly would mean 2 months.
I'm gonna say bi-monthly, that sounds better.
I always say that.
I always say bi-monthly.
No. I think bi-weekly would mean 2 times a week.
So I'm gonna go with that.
Okay, anyway. Doesn't matter. But the way I say it is correct. Anyway, so superiors are owed this honor and obedience by their people under them, right? Guys, stop talking, please. And Paul makes this clear in Romans 13:7. He says, pay honor to whom honor is owed. That's parents, pastors, employers, teachers, civil leaders, right? All of them are owed honor and respect from those under them. And to not give that to them is to rob them of what belongs to their office. And like we talked about in the Fifth Commandment, the person in that position may be terrible. Maybe terrible parent, terrible pastor, terrible teacher, terrible president, whatever. Okay, but they are in that position, and you're to honor them at least as far as that position goes. Now, if they're a good person, honor them beyond that position, because you just like them and they're a good person. But at least you have to at least give them the honor that's due to their position. But on the flip side, inferiors are owed different levels of provision from their superiors, right? All superiors are providing something to their inferior. And obvious example of this, children are owed food, clothing, shelter, and basic survival needs from their parents. And if they don't give it to them, the parents go to jail, right? We said, yes, this child has not, worked for anything here, especially if they're very young. They haven't worked for their place in this household, but they are your child, right? You have responsibility over them. And if you don't meet those, we're going to punish you, right? Even slaves, according to scripture, are owed certain things from their masters, right? Masters can't kill them, right? They can't, there are certain rules about slaves that they had in the Old Testament, right? So even they had certain rights. But regardless of whatever position you hold in a relationship, you have an obligation to the other person or people. And if you choose to ignore those obligations, you are robbing them, right? So that's theft by omission. You're robbing them of something, even if it's not money. All right, but now how do we remedy theft? We remedy theft through something called restitution. Now, with all sins, the procedure for making things right is very similar, right? You confess your sin to God and to whoever you sinned against, and you ask for forgiveness. But when it comes to theft, there's something additional, and that's restitution. Okay? What is restitution? Does anyone know?
I forgot.
In a sense, but that's more just straight up justice. Did you have your hand raised? Okay. Ryan?
Like if you like injure your neighbor's ox, something like that, and you pay it back to what it is, like the hole that you made, you pay it back to what it's worth.
Right. Yeah. And we have this in our legal system today, right? If you steal something or didn't pay something or whatever, you sometimes have to pay restitution. Okay. What?
Since you break it, you buy it.
Yeah, you break it, you buy it, plus a little extra. Like it says in this verse, it says, he shall confess his sin that he has committed. He shall make full restitution for his wrong, adding a fifth to it and giving it to him to whom he did wrong. So a fifth would be 20%. Essentially saying if you steal someone's, car, You got to, if the car isn't destroyed, if you still have the car, give them the car back and then pay 20% of what the car is worth, whatever that would be, right? So that's restitution.
Or what it's worth now.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. That would be up to the court to decide. But this is a good way of remedying this. Someone had their hand up. Okay. And the great thing about this is theft is a sin that can actually be reversed in many cases. That's not true for many sins, right? You can't resurrect a murder victim. You can't undo an act of adultery, right? You can't untell a lie, right? Now some of those you can make amends, right? You can tell the truth afterwards. You can reconcile with your spouse. There's not really a way to make up for murder. But unless obviously you go to surrender yourself to the court and justice. But theft, there actually can be reversed in a sense, right? If the thing is still here, you can give it back to them, right? And they'll have it again. Okay, you can return what was stolen. And if you destroyed it, then pay back its monetary worth or buy them a new one of whatever you stole, right? And in this passage, it says, return what you stole and add 20%. Now, this is only in the case of those who voluntarily give back what they stole. Right, it says he shall confess his sin, meaning this person is racked with guilt. I stole my neighbor's goat or whatever. I'm going to give him his goat back. And this is the Old Testament. They all had goats, right? I'm going to give it back to him and I'm going to give him 20% of whatever the goat's worth, right? So that's for voluntary. If they were caught with whatever they stole, like if they didn't give it back on their own, they had to pay 4 to 5 times what they stole. So I think it's in Exodus 22. It says if a man steals an ox, he shall repay 4 oxen, right? That's a court-ordered punishment. That's not you voluntarily saying, I'm going to give this back to the person I stole this from. Now, what if you can't find the person that you stole from? What do you do then?
Report it to the authorities.
I guess maybe you could do that. I don't know if they'd be able to find it.
Sorry, I stole a car.
Okay, let's say the person's dead. Let's say they're dead and they have no next of kin you can give this to. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because later in the passage they talk about this.
It goes to the government.
No, it doesn't.
It goes to you. It goes to their friend.
Children,
What if they don't have any children?
Their bill. Their bill.
relative, I don't know.
So if there is no next of kin, I believe Numbers 5:8 says this. It says if there's no next of kin, then the restitution should be paid. In this passage, it says to the priest, which in our modern context would be paid to the church, right? The money would be given to the church. Now, that has to be done with a confession of sin. It's not just, I'll just do this to kind of like clear my own conscience without telling why I'm doing this all of a sudden. It's like, no, you have to actually confess that sin. But if in that rare case, right, that would be what you would do. So yeah, restitution's a very good thing. It's a practical kind of repentance, right, which is not something you can do for a lot of sins, right? Now, flip side of this, we talked about theft, why you shouldn't steal. But if we shouldn't steal, then what are we going to have to do to get the things that we need? What? Okay, well, how do you get the money?
Work.
You work. Right. You work. Okay. And the Bible speaks of the importance of work in both the Old and New Testament. Excuse me. I'm going to focus on the New Testament passages in particular because it's going to more clearly dispel that myth about the church being some hippie communist paradise or whatever. So first passage is going to be 2 Thessalonians 3:10 through 11. And this, the first reason we work is for survival. Right, for survival. So this is Paul. Does anyone want to read this? Someone who hasn't read yet. Kerrigan. Right. So survival. That's kind of the main reason we work. Staying alive is hard work, which is something we kind of forget in our world of modern conveniences, right? We don't think of staying alive as something very hard to do. But in ancient times, basic survival tasks were far more difficult. Think of like you had to hunt for your food or grow your food. I mean, you could buy it from some people, but you couldn't buy as much. You had to fix or sew your own clothing. In many cases, you had to build your own house, right? These are different. You had to get your own water out of a well, right? All of these things. You had to preserve your food in different ways, things that we don't even think of, right? So survival was hard work back then, right? So some people talk about how it's like, oh, medieval peasants, they had like up to half a year off from their jobs. It's like, yeah, you're technically correct because of all the different church holidays. They had about half a year off from their assigned labor. That did not mean they didn't have to work to survive, like the basic survival needs of running a household. Like that's still a bunch of work, okay? Yet even then in ancient times, where survival tasks are this hard, there were still some who wanted to be lazy and mooch off of others, okay? And Paul rebukes them and says they should not even eat, meaning that people who refuse to work should not be given any kind of charity or support. None whatsoever. Yes?
Or if they old,
What?
or if they're old.
Well, then that would fall under disability. That's not someone who's just intentionally like, yeah, I could work, but I'm not going to.
I think Paul also says that the younger, like, you're supposed to take care of like your older parents.
Yes, he does say that. I'll actually get to that in a second. So charity, especially charity from the church. Did you have something, Zeke?
After you're done.
So charity is for those who are unable to work enough to support themselves, either temporarily or permanently, right? Some people just need a helping hand to get back to a good spot. Other people are going to need support for the rest of their life for a variety of reasons, right? And that's why Paul in 1 Timothy lays out requirements for widows to receive charity. He says they have to be older than 60. They have to have been faithful members of the church. They have to be Christian, right? They have to have no relatives. They say, does she have a son, a daughter, any kind of relative that can take care of her? If she doesn't, then the church can take care of her, but not before that, okay? So Paul's very careful with the kind of charity he's giving out because he knows people will try to take advantage of this, okay? There will always be people looking to take advantage of handouts. But we should remind them, if they are Christians especially, if they claim to be Christian, that idleness is a sin. Not working when you are able to and you need to is a sin. We're commanded to work for our own survival. Now, going down to just the very next verse, self-reliance is another reason for work. So this is the next verse. Now he says, now such persons we command and encourage in the Lord Jesus Christ to do their work quietly and earn their own living. Or an alternate version could be to eat their own bread. Okay? We are told to be self-reliant people. Now, in an absolute sense, like I said, very few people are totally self-reliant. Okay? We all rely on different people to perform different tasks. Farmers, doctors, police officers, construction workers, right? We rely on all sorts of people. Especially in the modern world, if you want to have all the modern conveniences, you can't do everything your own. You want to live in a cabin that's like this big that you built in the woods and eat the food that you grow or kill? Okay, go ahead. But you're not going to have a very pleasant life, or at least a life in society that way. Right? Survival is a group effort to some extent. So we're all acknowledging that. But what Paul is talking about here is that you have the ability to provide yourself and your family, if you have one, with at least the basic survival needs. Right? Are you able to pay for shelter, food, clothing, etc., without relying on anyone else? Right? That's self-reliance. And self-reliance can be taken too far if you find yourself in a situation where you do need help, like genuinely need help, but you refuse it just out of pride. Right? Like you get cancer, you have a rich friend who says, hey, I'll pay for your cancer treatment. And you're like, no, because you're just so prideful. Right? That's a sinful kind of self-reliance because you're just being stupid. But to the best of our abilities, we should take care of ourselves. We should want to take care of ourselves. Okay? And then lastly is charity. So coming back to charity. Ephesians 4:28. Does anyone want to read this one? Someone who hasn't read yet. Josh.
That the thief no longer steal, but rather let him labor, doing honest work with his own hands, so that he may have something to share with anyone in need.
All right, so even here Paul talks about thieves, thieves. He says, that thieves should instead turn their efforts instead from stealing to honest labor. It says, let the thief no longer steal, but let him work, right? Put your effort toward working instead of just stealing. And not only does this eliminate the need to steal, but it will allow them to share with those in need, right? It says, let him work, not just to support himself, but whatever he has, let him share it with people, right? This is a wonderful sign of redemption. You went from being a thief that took whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted, however violently he needed to now you are working selflessly to give to others without any hope of payback. That's a picture of the gospel, okay? All of us are commanded to be generous with what we earn or are given, right? Even if it's not something you work for, even if it's something you inherited, right? You're still called to be generous with it. And this doesn't need to be just limited to money either. Your skills, your knowledge, even your time. That's all something you can contribute to someone in need. So it doesn't matter, you're like, oh, I don't have that much money. Okay, do you have skills in something that people need? Can you build things, right? Can you teach people something, okay? Can you just give your time to someone, right? That's all charity, right? Those are all kinds of charity. Now, last here, being a good steward. So we shouldn't just be concerned with making money. Making money is good, it's necessary, but we have to be concerned with managing money and our other resources as well. So how do we do that? The first is to be diligent in your labor, right? Diligence. Proverbs 21:5 says, the plans of the diligent lead surely to abundance, but everyone who is hasty comes only to poverty, right? We all want to get rich fast. We all want to get rich quick, okay? You ever been tempted to buy a lottery ticket? I know none of you are actually old enough to technically buy lottery tickets. But you are. Have you bought one? How much did you win?
None.
Perfect example. The hasty is coming to poverty.
Why would you buy?
I mean, sometimes you can just win those.
Why not? It was like $3 and it was like fun.
Yeah, let me make it clear. It's not sinful to buy a lottery ticket, but it's sinful to blow all your money on lottery tickets foolishly. Noah?
My mom buys them, like
Mhm.
crossword ones.
Okay.
That lets me do them, and I think the most odd one for her is like $5 to $10.
That's kind of cool though, crossword ones. It's at least gives you something else to do. So yeah, we all want to get rich fast, but scripture and just human experience in general is clear that the ones who try to take the shortest route to wealth end up the most in debt and in poverty, right? You all hear the stories about people that win the $1 billion lottery and then they're...
You always hear about the ones that are, that have lost.
Yeah. You never hear about the ones that won and then just are like, bought a reasonably priced car and a reasonably priced house and then just invested over 10 years. You don't hear about those people. You hear about the redneck who bought a mansion and then went into debt. You're that person? Good for you. Don't spend too much on lottery tickets though.
I won't be spending any money on lottery tickets.
So those who stay committed and work hard over a long period of time, which that's what diligence is, it's hard work over a long period of time, they will usually reap the rewards. I say usually. Obviously, there's cases where you can be diligent and things just go out of control, and it's not necessarily your fault. Obviously, that can happen, but we're talking under normal circumstances, you will reap the rewards if you are diligent. And this applies in all areas of life, not just money, right? Relationships, physical health, habits, attitudes, skills. All of them take time and intentional effort to grow. All of them take diligence. Okay, but the results are not only greater than if you went the fast way, but they're stronger as well. Next is prudence in business dealings. Does anyone know what prudence is? Yes.
It's like thoughtfulness, self-control, and sort of like I don't want to say like you're stopping yourself. It's like you're aware, self-aware.
Yeah, that's definitely a big part of it. So prudence, another word for it is actually cunning, right? There's almost a sense of being cunning to it, but I'll get to that in a second. So another aspect of how we handle our resources is how we make deals with people, right? Like I said, we can't do everything on our own. So at some point we have to enter into contracts or agreements with others, whether it's to buy a house, buy a car, buy a gaming PC that you still buy. No, I'm kidding. You haven't entered into any contract with me yet.
If you even buy it, I'll save for it.
Okay. Anyway, we have to enter into contracts with people. It's how it's going to work, right? You're never going to be able to go through life without doing this. But you should be very wise and prudent in doing this. Right? Proverbs 11:15 says, "Whoever puts up security for a stranger will surely suffer harm, but he who hates striking hands in pledge is secure." So like I said, prudence is another word for cunning or discretion. Discretion is probably the best way, or discernment. And it means to be careful, yet decisive when taking action. So you're not doing nothing. You're not just sitting on your hands, but you're very careful when you do make a move. And when you do, it's very decisive. You're like, I know this is what I need to do. I'm going to do it. And in this verse, God's not saying to never make deals with people. He says, don't make deals with shady people. That's why he says a stranger, right? That doesn't mean all strangers are bad. It just means don't make deals with someone who you cannot trust, okay? You have to judge people's character in order to know if they're someone you can place your trust in. And if the answer is no, don't make the deal, okay? Many good, diligent people get swindled out of their money because they were too trusting in the wrong person, right? You all think of the old people that are on Social Security. They get the call from the Nigerian prince saying that he needs however many thousands of dollars, right? Or all the tons of internet scams out there that you keep getting messages for all the time. Yeah.
I can't believe people actually fall for that.
Well, yeah. Not trying to be disrespectful, but it's true. And hey, there's stupid stuff that Gen Z falls for all the time, right? Like all this stuff. What? You're an all-star. What?
Like what?
I'm Gen Z too.
Okay, I was about to say.
I was born in 2001. I'm the elders of Gen Z.
You just barely.
Yeah. I was barely alive during 9/11.
It was like, she was just made into Gen Alpha because she was
Ha.
2013, but she was June.
I had to, I was volunteering at a middle school last Friday. I do middle school ministry with Youth for Christ. And there's another guy there who's like almost 30. And one of the 7th graders or whatever said something, absolute brain rot. And the dude didn't know what he means. And I was like, here, I'll translate. And I had to translate for him. And he's like, oh, okay, thanks. So I'm kind of a bridge between the millennials and the Gen Alpha here. Anyway, don't make shady deals with shady people, right? And there's many good, diligent people that get swindled out of their money because they trusted in the wrong person. So we are, as Jesus says, to be as wise as serpents and innocent as doves, right? Don't be cunning for evil reasons, right? Don't try to cheat people out of a deal or anything, but be careful, be cunning, have discernment, right? Have discernment, especially when money is on the line. We're to do no harm, but also make sure no harm is done to us. But as Scripture makes us fully aware of, our time here on earth is short. And so we should, right here. And so our trust should not be placed in what we can acquire in the physical realm. So what does that mean for our possessions, right? What does that mean for the things that we own in this life? Well, they're going to be passed on to the next generation. Okay? Therefore, we have to think generationally when we're managing our resources. In Proverbs 13:22 says, a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children, but the sinner's wealth is laid up for the righteous. The temptation to worldliness is not to build great things. It's to build great things for yourself. It's really selfishness, okay? But it's a common attitude today that we should not really be concerned with building things for future generations because they need to figure things out on their own and pull themselves up by their own bootstraps and so on and so forth. And this is in large part why nothing is really built to last anymore. I mean, look at like the houses that modern houses that we have, modern everything that we have. Things break so easily. And it's not just because they're made out of cheap materials from some third world country. I mean, that's part of it. But the heart behind it is, oh, well, it doesn't matter what I leave the next generation. It doesn't matter what I leave my kids or my grandkids, right? This is just about me, right? This is a largely post-World War II mindset of it's just about me. The next generation needs to figure everything out on their own and pull themselves up, by themselves and figure it all out, right? We center everything around individual consumption and quick production, right? Can we get it to you fast and can you enjoy it? Instead of thinking how we can lay a foundation that our children and grandchildren will build on. Generational thinking is how we got the great civilizations of the past, right? Both pre-Christian, like Rome and places like that, but then also the Christian civilizations, right? That's how we got beautiful cathedrals and buildings and laws and art and all these things. That's how we got them, is because people thought generationally. Each generation builds upon what the previous one did, because that's the only way to progress as a society, right? The modern way of thinking is, I'm going to lay a foundation and then blow it up and tell my kids to build a new one, and then they should blow it up and tell their kids to build a new one. You don't get anywhere doing that, right? You have to lay something down that you give to your kids, and they say, thanks, Mom and Dad. Now I'm going to build the first floor, and then my grandkids will build the second floor, and then so on and so forth from there, right? You build on each other. If each generation has to figure out everything on their own, we're going to stagnate. And I would say we are stagnating because of that mindset, right? Nothing is passed on anymore. Everything is cheap and quick. What?
I think it's also the iPads.
In a sense, I think that's a manifestation of this. And yes, there's always the possibility that a generation can get spoiled and not build on what their parents did. They can rest on their laurels and say, wow, my parents built something great. I'm just going to sit here and chill and not try to build anything. Yes, that's happened. That's probably partially how we got here in the first place. But if we just want to avoid that, then you should just seek to be as poor as possible, because then your kids will never be spoiled. It's like, yeah, but poverty isn't good either. Like poor people are not inherently righteous. Like, there's a lot of problems. You go to poor communities, what are the common traits? Drug addiction, alcoholism, crime, out of wedlock births. Like, there's a lot of problems in poverty because it naturally drives you to be more desperate. Okay? But that's foolish, right? Seeking to be as poor as possible is foolish. Instead, build on what you were given and build for who's going to come next.